Hello, Dr. Adam. Welcome to Alliance University. I hope you're having a great time on the campus, and our GLA fellows and our undergraduates are especially happy to have you in the class and have these discussions. So I thought we'll just have a couple of questions and here have your views on the idea of liberal arts, which we are truly trying to pursue. And I would start off with one thing that we have done, and I would like to ask your views on that, is that from the very beginning in India, liberal arts is typically identified with the humanities, whereas here we are from the very beginning very sure that liberal arts encompasses the sciences, if not the engineering, and certainly mathematics. So what are your initial thoughts on that kind of a positioning?
Well, I will say that when I was originally told that this was a liberal arts program, my thoughts were that I would be sceptical how much I would actually be able to contribute it, for precisely the reason you say, that generally speaking, liberal arts refers to just specifically the humanities, and so I wasn't sure that I would really have much to offer, because my work is very much not the humanities, as far away from the humanities as it can be, to be honest. But I would say that generally, in the very name, liberal arts suggests that it is something that encompasses that it encompasses everything that we consider art, everything that has a certain level of inspiration to people. That's what liberal arts should mean. It should mean anything that can edify us as people in whatever way is genuinely meaningful. And I believe that there is much of that definitely in mathematics, and I would say in all fields of science, and possibly in engineering, and but I would say that there is not necessarily any field where field of genuine human investigation where there cannot be something that's inspiring. And so I think a genuine liberal arts program that has to take into account how much goes into producing great art, has to consider all these things together, I would say.
Yeah. That's true. And on that note, as you know that one of the things that we have been discussing otherwise is also the fact that you are trying to reach out to students who don't necessarily have a rigorous mathematical background, and we're trying to see if even they can be so to speak sensitized almost about the value of mathematics, if not develop the mathematical intuition in the true sense. So what has been your experience on that count?
Well, my experience has been that obviously given that there is only a sort of burgeoning mathematical faculty here at Alliance, and it is mainly focused, I think, still on the humanities, that the students who get here don't necessarily have a good background in mathematics, and don't necessarily know that much of the techniques. So it's quite difficult to pick a lot of what I say up. But I would say that I get from them the different sense that there is a certain enthusiasm to learn, a certain desire to know more, I would say. And I find this encouraging, because it does at least suggest that it's possible to convey to them a sense of why the very purest of disciplines, things that are things that are very far removed from anything that we usually encounter in our everyday lives, but are based on intuition so fundamental that I think they in some sense speak to everyone on some level. And I'm therefore very gratified to see that that I can sense some level of engagement and enthusiasm from my students, even if admittedly they don't always understand everything, which I wouldn't necessarily expect.
Yeah. And in fact, that sort of brings me to this discussion we were having just before this interview, that about the fact that in this course they are sort of trying to go back to the very foundations of mathematics and sort of understand mathematics in a fundamental sense, which also probably makes them rethink about what they usually identify as mathematics, because some of these people are economists, so they are used to statistical techniques to some extent, but they probably mistake that sort of instrumental use of statistical techniques as standing for the really more profound mathematics.
Yes.
So I think that's something that you can probably dwell upon more.
Well, I hope so. Yes. What I would say in that regard is that the way that people in the modern world are taught mathematics is very lacking. I would say, particularly well, certainly in schools, but I would say, but as at a higher education level, in most disciplines that are not not mathematically focused, or even perhaps that are not pure mathematically focused. We are sort of given the impression that what maths is about is learning formulas and applying them. This is that's rather a broad statement, I'm aware, but I do get the impression that is how a lot of people leave school, with the impression of what being a mathematician or being anyone who practices maths all about. And generally, I would say that unless you're very lucky, unless you sort of have good teachers, unless you sort of have people that engage you with the subject, you're probably going to go away thinking that that's not something that you really want to do. And so therefore, I think it's very important that for people who are sort of going to this university to sort of get hoping to be taught something which will improve their understanding of the world. I'll say improve their understanding of what we are, where we stand, and what we should do next. Should need to have an understanding of that subject which guides all sciences, and by extension all fields of practical investigation, and also, which in my opinion is very inspiring on the same kind of way that art and music and poetry are inspiring. And I feel like it's important for them to get a sense of that. And if they just go through their lives with a sense that it's just some numbers that make formulas that you apply and it's kind of boring, they're not gonna get that. So I think such a thing is very important.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things that we are looking at is, as you say, we have to convey that sense of excitement about the most fundamental ideas of mathematics, as much as maybe people are excited about, say, more popular scientific ideas like Einstein's theory of relativity or whatever. And do you feel that in that sense, mathematicians, if they sort of work with people in the disciplines of literature and philosophy, can figure out the best ways to, if not rediscover, but at least communicate their ideas in a more effective way for not just the lay audience, but even maybe for writing a better mathematics textbook? Is it a possibility?
Well, first of all, I would say that I'd be very happy for people to be inspired by popular science ideas like general relativity and quantum mechanics. These are beautiful scientific theories and based on very interesting mathematics. So in those regard, I would not complain. But what I would say is that fundamentally such disciplines would never have been able to be developed in the first place had it not been for people who were philosophically minded and who were aware of the current status of philosophy, and to some extent, I think poetry and literature would not have been able to sort of refine the ideas that were necessary for the development of such theories. So the answer to your question is very much yes. I would say that it's very important to have a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration, to have people who are mathematicians working with people within all disciplines, including those of literature, because I feel like in order to write something which communicates to an audience what is good mathematics, what it really is, what really makes it so fundamental and so beautiful, is someone who has the power to communicate such things in words. I mean, I don't think I would be a great writer or anything. If I was entrusted to write a textbook all by myself, I can't promise it would be the most well-written thing. Whereas someone who I feel works with literature and has much experience of writing, and who has a certain understanding of mathematical ideas, and who can collaborate with people who are well trained in the subject, they can produce something which is actually interesting to read and actually would make people want to learn more. So yes, I would certainly say that the idea of interdisciplinary collaboration between mathematics, science, and the humanities is very fundamental in this respect.
Indeed, and maybe you could let us know, since you were, you did your PhD at Oxford, and you yourself, from the conversations I've had with Dr. Anirudh and others, is that I've gathered that you have had the privilege of having many such interdisciplinary conversations when you were at that university, and if you could tell us a little bit how, in some sense, Oxford facilitates such the possibility of such conversations.
Well, I've not been based at many institutions, and Oxford was where I did my PhD. So and it was the only place where I found that I had an opportunity to collaborate with many people outside my field. At the institutions I've been at since, I have not really experienced that. So perhaps it is. So I would guess that it may be something that it may be due to the sort of student life at Oxford, which is because it is a collegiate university that we have the sort of opportunity in outside of work to talk to many people in different disciplines. But I wouldn't necessarily guess that is definitely the case, because at any university the students have social lives which involve talking to people from all disciplines. So I see no particular reason why the collegiate environment at Oxford would necessarily contribute to that. But I really couldn't say. But what I will say is that I get the impression that there's. It's very hard for me to say because my experience is so limited. But I get the impression that the people I met at Oxford who worked within law, who worked within literature, who worked within fields of the humanities, I had many very illuminating conversations with them that truly made me understand the value that being broadly minded, having interests that stretch beyond your own subject, and that try to appreciate the value of human discourse as a whole. It really made me appreciate the importance of that. For this reason, I would say that, and I'm glad that I was able to go to Oxford and have such experiences. I can't possibly comment on how those experiences would compare at other institutions.
All right, and on that note, one more thing occurred to me, which is more specific to how we approach mathematics. I think as you are teaching this course on the history of algebra, which is more or less your specialization as well. One of the things that certainly bogs students down when they're in school is that there is a pressure to master all aspects of mathematics because of the examination system.
Yes.
And so if we could introduce this sense of preference and sort of legitimize it, that okay, a student can say that, look, I'm good at geometry, maybe not at algebra, or maybe at vice versa, and I should still be allowed to pursue my interest in mathematics, and not be discouraged because after all the examination tests me in all counts. Do you think that's a possibility that might help in encouraging students to not lose their interest in mathematics early on?
First of all, I will say that it is good to have a very broad interest in all areas of mathematics, and to have a very broad knowledge of as many areas of mathematics as you can. You should never sort of say, there's a subject that I'm not interested in, so I'm not going to learn anything about that. That's not the ideal way to proceed. But at the same time, I would say yes, there's nothing wrong with having a particular interest in one particular area, one particular discipline that you feel you are best at. During my undergrad, I always found algebra to be the subject which I was most moved by, which sort of spoke to me on some level, more so than many of the other disciplines. But I will and so I'm glad I've been able to get the opportunity to pursue it. I will also say that I wouldn't have wanted to just learn about that particular subject. I wanted to have a broad knowledge of as many different areas as possible. But it's true. But I've always sort of maintained that it's always remained my specialization, I will say. And I don't think I have suffered as a mathematician from it. I think that working to what my strengths were, working to what my interests were, have not prevented me from becoming a mathematician and becoming broadly and having a broad understanding of what motivates everyone, whatever their field is. So I don't think there's any reason why people should be discouraged by a particular interest as in one area and perhaps less interest in other areas.
Sure. Yes. And the other question that occurs to me is something that we all were discussing, and I would like to reiterate that the very how to say the some people are just not able to appreciate how advanced complex mathematics, state of the art mathematics can be. And that leads me to the conversation that we are having, is that once in a while understanding complex mathematics is no less an achievement than inventing new mathematics. As you were saying that how difficult it is, everybody in the world knows that Andrew Wiles solved Fermat's last problem.
Yes.
But it is quite an achievement to even understand the proof and how much time that takes.
Indeed.
So I like this analogy between, and I had spoken about it, between a great literary critic and and a great mathematician. So a great literary critic is not compelled to be a novelist. He or she need not produce new literature, but still, insofar as she is a great exponent of how great literature is, there's a genuine contribution to the study of literature. Likewise, in mathematics, I think being a mathematician need not always entail, especially given the complexity of mathematical problems today, actually solving a new problem. Of course, but even being at the level that you understand some of these mathematical proofs in a holistic, complete way. So, would you?
Well, I would say that first of all, it's not possible to create new mathematics if one does not understand where we can understand it. So it is largely a discipline of understanding. I spend far more of my time trying to understand a particular topic than I do trying to prove new results in this topic. I would say generally, once one gains a large enough understanding of a particular area, one starts to see patterns and starts to develop intuitions for what should be true, and then tries to sort of find ways to work towards this. This would be impossible if one did not understand the area. So yes, I would agree with you. Becoming fully versed in a particular area is fundamental. It's the most fundamental part of the study, I would say. So there is nothing. In line with your analogy, I would say, as you say, being a great literary critic does not mean one has to be a great novelist. And indeed, most literary critics, I would say, probably aren't great novelists. I don't really know why the same is not true. There isn't a sort of analogous notion of this in mathematics. Why there is not a sort of a notion of a mathematician who spends their time developing understanding a subject, and others who spend their time improving new results. But I suppose the reason is because, as I say, the latter is an extension of the former. You need to be able to understand. You need to be able to understand and mathematics properly before you can prove your results. In the same way that I imagine to be a great novelist, one needs to have a great understanding of literature. So. One is by definition harder than the other because one encompasses the other. But this is no reason to say that being a literary critic is insufficient. That it's not a great thing to be. And similarly, that being a mathematician who mainly spends their time understanding rather than proving is not also highly valuable. And I don't think people should be discouraged in any way by it.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, and I would like to sort of continue this, if you like. This comparison with non-mathematical subjects, because one more thing that I wanted to ask you is the question of style in mathematics. What I mean by that is the whole idea that mathematical truths are not just facts in themselves, but how different mathematicians, different cultures of mathematics arrive at the same mathematical truths in different ways.
Yes.
One of the classic examples is Pythagoras' theorem, which, as you know, there's a consensus, was invented in several parts of the world simultaneously and independently, and yet no one quite emphasized the method of proof as the Greeks did.
Yes.
So likewise, in your own contemporary mathematics, do you notice a certain style of mathematics that's maybe, say, prevails in Oxford as opposed to maybe in the US or maybe in Russia or something, some broad aspects of approaching mathematical ideas which is which has to do with the culture of the mathematics that is practiced at that place?
Well, I can't. I don't. Well, I would say that the mathematical style we generally use is sort of universally agreed upon these days. I think generally the style was developed in Europe. I mean, it's kind of a mismatch of styles in itself. Like the numerals that we typically use, that we're used to, are, I believe, Indian in origin, but were popularized in Arabia, then later brought to Europe. So there are whereas the techniques that we use are largely more an inheritor of the sort of Greek techniques that were sort of developed and refined during the height of their sort of cultural and philosophical height. So yeah, there are lots of different sources, but generally speaking, I think during the last 200 years, for various reasons, it has been the European style of mathematics that has spread worldwide and is generally sort of agreed upon. But I would say that, as you say, all styles ultimately lead to the same conclusions, because mathematics, if it is practiced properly, are based on fundamental intuitions that no thinking creature can deny. They're not. It's not possible to have one mathematics and another mathematics that reach different conclusions, because the conclusions have to entirely be the same, because if it can be called mathematics, it is just a fundamental reality that is undeniable. So I don't necessarily lament the fact that there is a universal style, because I would say that it just enables communication over people who come from very different cultures, because
Exactly.
the conclusions, regardless of how it's written, the conclusions are always true. They're always the same, and therefore it just helps to have universal style. I would say. So yeah, that would generally be my thoughts on that.
Yeah, in fact, the reason I say that is because in India, one of the figures of mathematics, most legendary figures of mathematics, that is Ramanujan.
Yes.
He was always accused of not developing proofs for all the results that he conjured up, and there was this big debate by some skeptics whether he deserved the kind of the celebration, the kind of accolades or the kind of deification that we reserve for him today, given that there were so many results he came up with which were not proved, but maybe which turned out retrospectively right.
Which they were not. The proof of them was not entirely written down by Ramanujan. You are correct. Ramanujan. He had a mathematical mind that is beyond anything that I think I will ever be able to achieve. I would say, but I would say that Ramanujan had an intuition for certain results that to him just seemed to make sense. He could make sense. He could sort of view an argument and simplifying very complex arguments down to sort of very simple steps of intuition that to him he was satisfied by. And you see examples of sort of microcosms of this all throughout mathematical history. I believe there was I may be wrong about this, but I believe when Évariste Galois, who was one of the most prolific European mathematicians, went for an examination at the École Polytechnique in the early 19th century, his examiners asked him to properly justify a step in one of the arguments he'd given, to which he refused, simply saying it was obvious, but it was obvious to him, not to them. And I think similar to this could be said for Ramanujan. He didn't really want to have to be bogged down with justifying every step in his arguments, because he could just see that it was justified. It was justified. It was up to G.H. Hardy and the people who worked with him to be able to sort of properly reason out of him steps in argument how it works. Now, these kind of intuitions can occasionally, I would say, overall, I would say you should be cautious of, because they can lead to mistakes. They can lead to sort of errors in your reasoning, which mean that actually, despite your certainty, is actually wrong. So mathematical proof is needed, and so therefore I can sympathise with the position that Ramanujan, that if it had not been for Ramanujan working with G.H. Hardy and other mathematicians to actually provide full proofs for what he thought, I would say there's an argument to be said that he had not fully proved, that he had not truly justified his reputation as a visionary mathematician, because if nothing he actually said was proved to be true. But given that given that it was brute true, and given that he clearly had a great understanding of it all, I would say that Ramanujan more or less deserves the reputation he has.
Indeed. In fact, I mean, I'll sort of try to ask you a couple of one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yes.
So basically, what we can say inadvertently, maybe Ramanujan, by stating these theorems without proofs, was actually posing problems for other mathematicians to solve. And one of the things that I'm increasingly realized that in mathematics, posing a well-framed problem is no less important than coming up with a solution. And some of the great mathematicians in the past have actually contributed not by solving an existing problem, but actually coming up with a new conjecture or coming up with a new problem. And I think that has actually driven mathematics forward and led to the production of new mathematical techniques. So and I think that's something that maybe in the liberal arts we take for granted, because we often say that liberal arts is not just about finding answers but asking the right question.
Yes.
Which is sort of not encouraged in the sciences, generally in the typical way. So is that a way of looking at it? Like, can we see it as?
I would say it makes sense to say it's very valuable to come up with the right questions. I mean, you can come up with a lot of questions in mathematics, and most of them are either going to be proved to be false, or they're just going to be proved to be that we don't have the techniques anywhere near the techniques developed to be able to approach them yet. But being able to sort of ask the right question at the right time, be able to sort of develop an intuition for something that you feel definitely should be true, but you can't quite see a way there yet. That is something that is very valuable. If you can't solve it, then you can put it out there, say, can you solve it? So yes, creating problems is good. And also creating problems that you do have a solution to sort of saying, I've got a solution to this, see if you can get one. This also sort of encourages people to get more involved, because if they know there's a solution, they're going to feel more confident sort of approaching it and sort of working it out for themselves than they are if it's just a thing which no one else has been able to solve, and therefore they're very daunted by that aspect. And I would say that yes, there's probably, I'm sure there's analogies to this within the humanities, within liberal arts. I think that you can particularly in philosophy, you can always say that there is some particular problem which we feel we should be able to give a coherent answer to, but we can't necessarily think of what it is right now. And I'm sure there's a similar notion across all disciplines. You can always say there are always going to be problems, and being able to sort of articulate those problems, say what they are, and say to people, what do you think? Can you solve them? Is a very worthwhile thing to do, provided you know how to find those right questions, I would say.
Yeah. And in fact, on that note, I'll just ask you one final question, because one of the things that I have been fascinated by is also not just a general revived interest in mathematical ideas in all their profundity, but also this fact that in our country and maybe in the world at large also, there is a need for a basic mathematical literacy. There's this word for this which I came across. They're calling it a sort of ignorance of mathematics. They're calling it innumeracy, being innumerate. And I think with COVID and the way COVID statistics are playing out, or how opinion polls are presented on television and people are manipulated, I think it's high time that as a population or as a democracy, we think that mathematical literacy is a very basic condition for some kind of citizenship. And I feel personally for us, that is the reason making mathematics as one of the foundational quantitative thinking is also a foundation course for liberal arts, as much as the art of argument. So I mean, how do you agree with that kind of a worldview?
Yes, I'd say it's always very distressing to me when the people are just presented with numbers and statistics, and as expected to sort of just take it on trust that these make sense when they have no understanding of them. this is just a tool. This is something that is right to be exploited by many people. I would say that basic skills in numeracy are fundamental to a proper education, and people that can't grasp basic concepts and are just sort of switch off whenever sort of numbers are presented to them is a recipe for disaster, I would say. So I would absolutely encourage that people are taught the essentials of practical mathematics at the earliest point in their education and at every step in their education. The art of argument is something which is universally applicable as well. And with this you can go not just into mathematics but into any field of discipline to understand how to reason something logically from a certain starting point. But it's not enough to become mathematically trained. To become mathematically trained, it's fundamental to have skills in numeracy and to have skills to understand notions of what you say to understand notions of quantity and I suppose basic techniques in basic mathematical techniques. I'd say these are all fundamental. So yes, I would agree with that completely.
Yeah, and in fact, I'll just end with a closing remark that for us when we were starting this department, all of us were very clear that we would ensure this kind of a transdisciplinary conversation between the arts and mathematics, or the social sciences and mathematics continuously, and that would be sort of a guiding if you like, a theme for whatever we do, whether it is an undergraduate course or the Global Leaders Alliance program, so given your presence here, we feel that we are really closing in towards that vision, and we really thank you again for coming to Alliance.
I'm very grateful to be here, and I very much enjoyed taking part in the Global Leaders Alliance program. So thank you very much for having me. I have to say.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Agdam. Yeah.